I think that the public, if they heard the benefits of Teal, they would vote for that party. And when I explain to you what Teal can do for the country, reduce the taxes, boost the economy through investment. The country was tax-free. Investment would come in, the rand would strengthen considerably. I mean, it would come from 16 down to 6 over a period of time. So that would boost the economy.
Yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Solly Moyeng again. Welcome to WorldView. This is the #1 media company where we explore everybody's perspectives on all things that can broaden our worldview. Thank you again for joining this discussion. We're going to be talking money, what needs to change. We keep going on about the systemic changes that need to happen for South Africa to hopefully rise on its feet again and maybe even become a lot better country for everybody. So today we're talking money, tax revenue collection. We know that the South African revenue system has been brought to its knees by the likes of Bain and company, Tom Moyane, Zuma. At least those are all the people that are implicated to what's been happening. And we keep trying to do things over and over the same way, hoping that we'll get out different outcomes. So today we're going to discuss a potentially different alternative. Obviously, let's hear what it means. The total economic activity, is that what it is? Teal.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, with Alton Geils, who has, from what I've seen so far, he has taken a lot of time to put a lot of detail into this, what could be an alternative workable plan for South Africa. Giles, welcome to WorldView.
Thank you, Solly. Thank you.
Do you want me to call you Giles, Mr. Giles, or
Alton?
Alton,
yeah.
There you are.
So Alton, certainly not this there.
As I was saying in my interview, and we all know that South African revenue system was given a seriously, almost like a death blow through state capture by all the people that have been implicated in it. And but now everybody is really just talking about replacing solely with Alton, or Alton with Mary, or Mary with Mpumakazi, etc. They're not talking about the systemic changes that need to happen. People don't seem to be asking, how did it happen? We thought we had a robust system that nobody could damage. But look at where we are at now. What do you think should happen? Tell us first about where these ideas came from and how you think they could be implemented.
Okay, Teal was the brainchild of a fellow became my colleague. His name is Bob Shambrook. And in 1985, he happened to be in the Ivory Park squatter camp, and looking around, he saw the conditions.
Yeah, I would like you to assume that your audience is global. Where's this Ivory Park squatter camp?
Ivory Park squatter camp is just outside Johannesburg, in the Midrand area.
Right.
And at that time, when he was there, it was sort of late evening, and he looked around saying, look at the squalor and the way these people are being forced to live. And that set him on the path of trying to find a different way that that the tax income could be used to uplift the people.
Right.
So that was, I think, in about 1986, 87. And he sat in front of his computer for years.
That was during apartheid?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, he and his neighbor got together and they came up with a Teal system, and I only joined the clan in early 92.
Right.
From that time on, he and I sort of tried everything to get Teal introduced, or thought, not introduced, but looked at, to discuss it.
Right.
Anyway, soon after the election, one of the fellows who was part of our team wrote to Mr. Mandela.
That was soon after the 1994, the historic elections that ushered in democracy. Right.
Correct, yeah. And Mr. Mandela arranged a meeting for us, and there were in our team, there were half a dozen of us at that stage, and we were invited to a meeting with the Director of Tax Policy in Pretoria.
Right.
there were other people around. We had members from the banks, members from the post office, and so on and so forth. People who the director of tax policy thought might be interested in the idea of Teal. Anyway, we did a very nice presentation on screen for them, and at the end of the meeting, we were sent home by the director saying, "Come back to us, let us know what it would cost to do proper research on this." And he instructed the rest of the people in the meeting to also come back with their views. Anyway, after a couple of weeks sitting down the table, we decided we'd need around about 4 million rand to do the research properly, bringing in universities and those sort of research people that could assist. And when we went back to him, he was blunt. He just said, "There's no way I'm going to even approach my political masters for 20 million rand." So we said to him, "Oh, it's not 20 million. It's only," and he cut us off saying, "I don't care what it is. We're not funding this research." So that was blunt. So he said,
Is that person still in the system? You don't have to name them. Oh, you can actually.
I don't know if he's still.
You do remember who it was?
I can't remember the name. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was trying to think of it just the other day. Anyway, he said to us, "Take your ideas for Teal overseas, and if people after you've done the presentations, if the people overseas like it, then we'll do it." So,
was it somebody from the old system or somebody who had just come in with the new administration?
I think somebody who just come in with a new administration. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Anyway, we said to him, "Oh, but what does Europe know about our tax in South Africa?" And his remark was, "You will be surprised what they know about our tax system and our government." Anyway, we went out of there with our tail between our legs and spent the rest, years later, we're still plugging away trying to get Teal, people to listen to Teal, about Teal. Anyway, we went to political parties. We went to the DA, we went to the New National Party, and one party did pick up on it, and that was the ACDP. They showed interest, and we did a few presentations, 2 in Durban, one in one of the big hotels at a major convention, and one up here, and they liked the idea. Anyway, nothing came of it. We had a various. Then we went to we met with DA representatives who approached us actually, and then after a period of time, we got hold of the Potchefstroom University.
During those early years, the DA wasn't called the DA; it was something else, right? It was in the early 90s, mid 90s. The DA was only formed a little bit later, wasn't it?
Yeah, I can't remember that. I know that.
Who was the leader?
Leon was in charge.
Was it Tony Leon? Okay, it doesn't matter. I think the timing is also interesting to note. Yeah.
Anyway, they approached us, and the first. In fact, sorry, just let me correct that there. Prior to the election, the 94 election, Bob Shambrook and one of the other members of the team took Teal to the DA, to a fellow by the name of Burrows, and he was so excited about the idea that he said, "I will take this to head office or down to to the leaders of the party, and I'm sure they'll jump at it." Well, they didn't. Nothing happened. Just quiet. Anyway, after the election, we went back, and I was involved at that stage, and in discussions, again, they thought it was a good idea. I'm sorry to say that I just can't remember all the names.
It's fine, but also we have to know that all these parties that except the DA, the African National Congress and the NP at the time, which are still alive, would have been the right people to approach. And I see that somebody pushed it back, but ACDP was just a little minion. The DA was so you went to the little boys expecting them to influence the big boys. The big boys were not listening.
Yeah, wrong move, I think. But we also, funny enough, we met with General Bantu Lamisa.
Right.
In fact,
he was still with the ANC at the time.
Yeah, we invited us along, and we went along, and we didn't actually present to them at the time, but in a meeting they said, well, they would include it on their manifesto. So anyway, as I say, nothing happened, and even the DA, they took it to Tony Leon, and I think the report came back from Tony Leon that he said, "Tell them to join the party, and we'll take it through. We'll take it up through the levels." You know. So he said, "Well, how's that going to
He's
help?"
a real politician. Yeah.
So you know, the elections came and went, and unfortunately, Bob passed away in 2006 at the age of 83. And just prior to his death, he said, "Take this over and do what you can with it." So I was left high and dry. We'd actually formed a company at that stage called SA Taxation System,
right,
Pty Limited, because we would, in fact, it was quite a while before his passing, because we wanted to try and sell the idea, and we thought if it was owned by a company, we could do that. You know,
right.
Anyway, that was just a pipe dream, because that never came off. And I've been beating the Teal drum ever since. I've been taking it to whoever will listen.
Yeah, when you tried to introduce it in the early 90s, you needed about 4 million rands to do further research to
research into it. Yes.
Has that research? It obviously didn't come from the people you hoped would put some money down for it. But has anything ever been done? Are the ideas, the Teal ideas that you sell today, still what they were in the early 90s, or has there been further research that made them even more compelling to sell today in 2022, almost like more than 30 years later?
No research has been done to that in-depth research. One of our members knew somebody at the Potchefstroom University, and they agreed that they would do the research, but then they wanted 100,000 rand, which we couldn't come up with at the time, so that fell on its nose. But they were very excited about it. In fact, we had a meeting with the DA and the Potchefstroom University in the offices I was working from at the time, and it was decided that if we, Potchefstroom University said, "Well, look, if you guys can come up with the money, we'll do the research."
Right.
And the leader of the DA delegation at the time said, "Well, look, we don't know that the DA will actually do the funding of it," and nothing came of that either. It just.
They were still in the mid-90s, late 90s?
Yes, mid-90s. Yeah.
Mandela was still president, not before Mbeki. Right.
Yeah. Before Mbeki came in, yeah.
Okay. So,
and then, sorry?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I just said we didn't get any research done. It was just left to our own resources and how we could present it to whoever would listen.
Has there been any opportunity to maybe use outside of South Africa resources like universities and maybe other research institutions to say, maybe if we tested it outside, South Africans would maybe become more curious about it?
No, I don't think so, Sully. The simplicity of Teal, it doesn't really need any research. If you look at what we've got a tax system.
Well, wait a minute. You're the one who said it needed about 4 million rands worth of research.
At that stage,
So if we say now it so simply doesn't need to. Look, in the meantime, let's face it, this state capture and other forms of corruption aside, South Africa did build a very robust tax collection system that was respected worldwide. There was a lot of praise for what SARS used to do until the Zumas and the Moyanis and the Bain and companies arrived. And Bain came to South Africa with a plan, with a restructuring of SARS without even understanding what SARS was doing or how SARS was doing what it was doing. And the thing is, they pushed a different. This is not. Basically, they said to South Africa, that's not the way you collect tax. This is how you do it. Something that was untested. They had no experience in tax collection. Now, if you come in with Teal to say, South Africa now needs to heal, right? You either say, okay, let's help you make the system robust again so that it can, because it was good. I mean, obviously, all systems are not perfect. They can always be improved. But you seem to be saying, no. You need to take the whole thing out, throw it into the bin. There's something called Teal that could do a much better job. So you need to do a load of hard sell.
Quite right. We believe long before Bain and those fellows came to South Africa that the Teal system would do a far better job than the tax collection that was going on at the time. Even in the early days with the Nationalist Party, we went to them because we realized that the country didn't have money. It had a certain tax system that was robust, but there was only a few people were paying tax. And what we were going to do was we were going to expand the tax net incredibly. It was just going to it would be I can't give you the percentages, but something like 20 times bigger the tax net would be. So this would generate more money, bring it into the fiscus.
Okay,
so
let's unpack it.
Have money to spend.
Yeah, let's unpack it. Let's tell our viewers what Teal does, what it would do.
Okay, all right. Well, okay, as you said, the name Teal is an acronym for Total Economic Activity Levy.
Right.
And in the build-up to and all the research and the stuff that we went through, we didn't know in the early days what the total economic activity of the country was. And we said, well, the only way to measure that, we believed, was to go and get an idea of what the bank turnover was. We, for a couple of years, we tried various people to find out what it was. Until we
are you talking about the Reserve Bank, the South African Reserve Bank?
No, the total turnover of the commercial banks.
Oh, the revenue. Oh, okay.
Yeah, the money that flows through the system. Anyway, we established after a long time, and we actually got a meeting with the Reserve Bank, believe it or not, and they told us what it was, and we were to coin a phrase, we were gobsmacked at the value and the total. What the total flow of money amounted to.
Right.
And I'll give you that figure now. That's 350 billion rand per day.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
A lot of money.
Right. We were then informed, of course, that that wasn't all yours and my money and company money. A lot of it was made up by the bond market. I didn't even understand what the bond market was in those days, but just to explain, the government issues bonds, and people buy the bonds, and they trade with these bonds.
Right.
And that 350 billion, about 60% of that is the bond market.
Okay.
The rest is you and me and.
Yeah, I mean, there are times when government bonds are more attractive than others, depending on what's going on in the politics.
Yeah. Right? They were attractive. I mean, people. Certainly, institutions were buying into them, and like there was no tomorrow. Anyway, we were told we couldn't apply a levy to the banking turnover because the bond market would collapse. So we said, we'll leave the bond market out of it. Let them. Everybody pays tax, no matter whether you're in the bond market or not. So they would have paid their tax in the normal way.
So you'd leave the 60% out and go for the 40%.
Yes, correct. Now that's if we levied that amount by, let's say, 1%, you'd arrive at a revenue of possibly, I think we worked out at about 105 trillion.
That was like mid-90s. That was mid-90s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if you apply it again, so that would be the revenue, and that would be taken into the fiscus.
Right.
And at that stage, the tax income was around about R1 trillion. So it would be, we balance it out.
Right.
Anyway, we looked at the bond market at that stage and thought to ourselves, well, okay, if it is 60%, right, what would happen if the bond market wasn't there? So if the government adopted the system, they wouldn't need to borrow, they wouldn't need to issue bonds or sell bonds, government bonds, because it would be unnecessary. So the bond market would actually collapse, which is a pity. But look at it from the people on the ground. They don't get any benefit from the bond market. Nothing happens. It's the guys on the ground who need to be uplifted, if you want to use.
Well, I mean, the bond market doesn't benefit you directly, the person on the ground, right? But when government has got access to that credit for a period, hopefully, I'm assuming the money doesn't get stolen, it enables government to have coffers in it, money in its coffers to deliver, essential services to South Africans. And
Well,
also to be able to, being able to access those international markets or credit markets is good for the country to some extent. Obviously, provided we don't borrow more than we should.
Well, that's just what happened. I mean, our borrowings at the moment are around about 5 trillion.
Yeah.
That's what we owe as a country. I mean, that's an enormous amount of money.
Mm.
And how are we ever going to pay that back? We don't know. But
Right.
if we followed the principles of Teal, we could raise the necessary money, and instead of paying that directly into the fiscus, like our tax goes, it goes into the treasury, and the treasury then puts it into the fiscus, pays out. We could in fact put that into a state bank. If we followed,
don't say that too loudly to the ANC right now, okay?
No, I know that. That's probably why it's not getting any.
Don't give them ideas like that.
Well,
okay. I mean, obviously, all of this is assuming that we have ethical leadership in South Africa that doesn't steal. We have people who have public interest at heart and all that. Because tax collection is one thing. You can perfect all the tax collection methods you want, but if the money goes to people who steal it or who make favors for their friends, like we had with Mayane, ensuring that people who owed huge hundreds of millions to the taxpayer didn't pay because they were buddies of the president. I was saying, so you need to have all those other checks and balances in place.
Well, I remember that Zuma tried to influence the treasury, and he was stopped at the door. So they just couldn't get their hands on the key to the treasury.
Right.
Now, so the treasury could be used in this regard, because the treasury could create its own bank, and if that bank was created and using normal banking principles, we could use the money that's gathered as a reserve, and then create money from there, because that's exactly what the banks do at the moment.
Right.
You're borrowing credit. You're just borrowing fresh air. They make it from nothing. So in order to provide the necessary money we need for the country, we could do that. So every year we could create the same amount. We could bring in R1 trillion and create 10 trillion. It's necessary, and that's what we suggest. So if the money it comes into the treasury, then what was necessary for the fiscus could be paid out, and then the government could then, on certain budgets, be put forward to pay for the upliftment of the country.
Right. But
first
I mean,
of all,
go ahead.
First of all, there would be no tax. Okay, so in principle, the money that was collected in tax is now in the people's pockets, because they haven't had to pay tax. There would be no VAT, there'd be no company tax, no personal tax, no site tax, no all the taxes that you want would be gone. And the petrol levy or fuel levy would be removed, which would then result in a petrol price of around about, I think, 13 Rand a litre, 14 Rand a litre. Well, that in itself would boost the economy.
Let's say that again. So individuals would not be required to pay tax under Teal, but the money would go into the bank how?
No, there are two issues here. First of all, we've got the money flowing through the banks.
Right.
Maybe I've sort of jumped the gun here. The money flowing through the banks goes through a system called the National Payment System at the Reserve Bank.
Yes.
I don't know if everybody knows that. That goes to the National Payment System. And that value is 350 billion Rand a day.
Okay.
It's monitored there. And as I said,
of which 60% is about 60%.
Yeah, correct. So that money, if we levied that, and the Reserve Bank were to pay that out, would pay it to the Treasury. That would amount to
so basically, it's like we still collect some money from the system, but we collect it at source.
Correct.
Yeah.
But now the people, the public, wouldn't be paying any tax.
Yeah.
Okay. So in essence, if that money's not being paid, it's staying in their pockets. So it's back in the economy. And today it could be around about 1.2 trillion investment annually from the people back in the economy, because they're not using it.
Yeah, I mean that's also assuming the economy is grown, everything is,
It
working.
would grow.
This is not like a standard. But I'm also surprised that you haven't sold this kind of system to other countries in the world. I mean, so if or after all this, I know that resources would be required, but to say, look, we've sold this thing to Switzerland, to Finland, to Denmark, or whatever, and they've applied elements of it. We can learn from it. South Africans tend to be like that. Africans, we tend to be is it working elsewhere? Is it working? Okay, let's have a look at it. Or you bring
Yeah.
us a totally new idea, and is it tested? You know what I'm saying? And I think right now, and I'm really just saying this since right now, South Africa is trying to stand up again after all the damage that was done to SARS.
Yeah.
I suspect that there is not enough appetite to try something new, especially after Bain and Company, a global firm that came and said, "Yeah, we got the solution." Of course, they didn't have the solution. They just and everything. If you look at what happened, that led to them coming to the system. Zuma, where you get Zuma involved and his minions involved, you know that there's no integrity. Okay, so they've messed up the system. Now, South Africans, I would be keen to have you meet with Kiswater, the new SARS commissioner, and have a sense of and see what you'd say to this.
Well, you say take it overseas for one. If I can't convince people in my own country to do it, I'm not going to go overseas. I don't have the resources.
Many
None
of
of
us
us have.
can't convince people in our country on many things. We have to leave to speak from outside. Many artists, Elon Musk, a lot of people can't shine in South Africa. Unfortunately, they have to be out there in order to shine, and they will start saying, "Oh, they belong to us." Unfortunately, that's how it is.
Well, I think I'd rather just keep it in house at the moment and try and convince my colleagues
It's
and
30,
my
30, 32, almost 35 years later. The colleagues are still
well,
not taking it.
it needs money. It actually needs a little bit of research. But
All right.
if a political party were to be formed, or a political party were to adopt Teal and put it up as their shining light to the people of South Africa, I believe they'd win the next election, hands down. They would be
Yeah.
able to dispense with all the other parties. They would
So,
70, 80% of the vote.
yeah, look,
But it has to be sold to the people.
Yeah, it's true. But look, it seems I'm looking at the practicalities of it. It seems attractive. It really does. But if you look at what has been happening with the South African education system since the beginning of democracy, they've changed curriculum over and over again. People are frustrated. Like, what are we teaching? What's the state of South Africa's education? So with SARS, we had a vehicle that was working at least until the Zumas and the Bain of this world came on board. I don't know if there's appetite to say, oh, no, but we have a totally new system to set. Where do you start in installing a new system? You know what I'm saying? When we're trying to recover from damage that was done recently, I don't know if it's going to work. I mean, it's I'm not being negative. I'm just saying you come into somebody who's been badly wounded, who's trying to stand up and was wounded because somebody came in and said, "Hey, we have a better system, we have a new structure." But the structure was working, and look at the damage they left behind. Now you come in and say, "No, I have a totally new structure." We've been there before. It's twice beaten, twice shy, isn't it?
I don't think anybody's ever tried to introduce a new tax system. They might have tried to tidy up the tax system.
Oh, they didn't try to tidy up. They didn't try to tidy up. They tried to mess it up so that crooks could be protected from their responsibility towards the taxman. That's what they did. They didn't try to fix it.
I think that the public, if they heard the benefits of Teal, they would vote for that party. And when I explain to you what Teal can do for the country, reduce the taxes, boost the economy through investment. Yeah. Yeah. If the country was tax free, investment would come in, the rand would strengthen.
Yeah.
Considerably. I mean, it would come from 16 down to 6.
Yeah, no,
over a period of time. So that would boost the economy.
Yeah, I would say. Okay, but I would say to you that it shouldn't be politicians who come up with this. I mean, you're saying if a new political party would go, no, let me just say this. I think my view, if somebody who is already running the current tax SARS, the revenue collection system, were to say to listen to the story till and decide, wow, this is really awesome, I think it would be more credible coming from that independent, if you want source. I mean, SARS is without some politician. Politicians are bad people for this sort of thing. They really are. Maybe we should keep them away from it as far away as possible. Okay, but if SARS, Skiswater, who seems to be like a credible man, or at least from where I'm sitting, if you were to say, okay, I have something that can work, and the politicians would listen to him, either agree or disagree with him, but at least they would listen to him. But now they've already been kicked in the butt by people who came from outside with supposedly awesome systems, and those systems were imposed by politicians. So if I started a political party tomorrow, I would never go anywhere near next to I have a totally new way to collect tax. I'm not going to do that. The system, the tax system has got awesome professionals in there who can say, wow, we can, because their job, their mandate is to collect revenue.
I would be happy. I'd be happy to take it to them if they'd listen, if they'd give me the opportunity to discuss it with them. Everybody would, get sit around the table and discuss it. But I'm convinced that there is no better idea than the Teal revenue collection system. It would work. And it would give government, the ruling party government, money to spend on upliftment, housing, roads, infrastructure, fixing Eskom. That's going to take a few bob to
I mean, suppose somebody said, wow, that's a great system. Let's work on it. Now, two things. One, you said, and I want to go back to this question. Many years ago, about 30 years ago, you needed 4 million rand. It could be more now to do further research. Okay, now you just said, no, you didn't need it. No, let me just say it. This is an idea that was created more than 30 years ago, some 35 years ago or so. Now, the world has changed. A lot of things have moved. The economy works in a different way. At the time, we probably didn't have a strong system. It was between the creation of Teal and today that SARS was created into a very robust institution. Of course, now it's still now trying to stand up from, but the point I'm making is you can't have put those ideas on pause and the world changed so much and you reappear with the same ideas 35 years later to say this. Do you take into account everything that has happened?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, everything. I mean, the current system has never been a good system, no matter how robust it was. It just never produced enough money.
But that's
even
what
in the days of the apartheid days.
That's what Bain and company was saying, that you guys can do better.
If
but
they said
doing
that,
well.
then they're correct.
No, they were not. Look at what they did. No, they were not correct. I'm sorry. The South African revenue collection system was one of the most robust around the world. It was respected. People came to learn how, and there were times when they even exceeded their revenue collection targets. We know that it's on record. Okay, there was money. The problem with South Africa was not whether or not we're collecting money correctly. The problem is that that money ended up going into directions where it wasn't supposed to go. The problem is that we started putting schmucks into those positions. That said, damn, so much money we can do, and they started saying, okay, they started doing favors to people who were funding their political friends who owed a lot of money. Some stories around that some people in the underworld who were supposed to pay huge amounts of money to the Turks men were given loopholes not to, because they were funding political schmucks on the side. So you can have the best system in the world, but if you're going to put wrong people to run that system, if you give me if you say, sorry, here's a helicopter, go and fly it. I've never run a helicopter. I'm going to smash the whole thing. I was like, so we have to put the right people. We need the checks and balances. We can't. I don't know if we need to start from scratch. We had a good collection system, unless somebody can show us that anything new that gets promoted can do even better than what we had. We exceeded our tax collection targets, for God's sake, at some point.
Well, okay. What were those targets? How did when we were a robust system, how did that help the people on the ground? It didn't.
Well,
there was no upliftment there was no change in poverty. It's got worse. It's got worse. And I understand what you're saying.
Because
the wrong people in place.
We had the wrong people in place. The money was there. South Africa, if you look South Africa was the #1 economy in Africa. Now it's #3. We came in as the most industrialized economy on the continent. I always say to people that we taking over from apartheid into the new order, we had the best institutional starter pack, to grow from. But the things we had the wrong people. The money was there. It was stolen. It was all sorts of crazy things were done with it. So it's not the revenue collection that was a problem. It's whether or not there was respect for the institutions and the placing at the heart of everything that people did of public interest. And that's the ethical. We didn't have ethical people running this. We had criminals running. Even now in South Africa, you go to parliament, there are people who should be in jail. So how do you get criminals to be lawmakers? What laws do criminals make? I mean, that's a different discussion.
Put that aside for one moment. That aside for one moment. We've got criminals who steal the money. Yeah. But you say we had a robust tax collection system.
We did.
But hang on, there were only 2 million at that stage. Only 2 million taxpayers out of 60 million people, or 50 million people, whatever it was at that stage. The tax was a burden on the people. It was a burden on companies.
Well, in all countries, people pay tax.
Hang on a second. This would not be a burden. This would relieve the tax on people, so they would be happy to have 1% as opposed to 18%, 30%, 40%. They'd be able to use their profits in their companies for the upliftment of those companies, for the employment of more people, and not feel the burden of tax. I mean, every year, I'm doing mine at the moment.
Yeah, of course, it's
absolute nightmare.
But
and I make up a very small percentage of taxpayers.
Right.
They're out there, and when we need more revenue, what do? They increase the VAT level. Like the last one or two ministers of finance we've had, they just upped the VAT level. What's the VAT? It's a punitive tax, VAT. It's a punitive. It scratches people. It pushes the cost of food up. It does everything that's wrong. And yet they can only think of, up the VAT level to create more money. I know they steal it, but let's put that aside for a moment. The tax
but what makes you think they wouldn't steal the money from Teal?
No, I'm not saying they wouldn't. I'm not saying no. You have to have checks and balances. But let me come back to that at a later stage.
Okay.
And assume they won't do it. We need an easy revenue collection system, and to do it the way we're suggesting with Teal, a levy on the banking turnover would provide us with that money.
Right.
It would go straight into the treasury and then be used as it's meant to be used without the politicians getting involved in it.
Okay.
So the weight is now removed from the public. They don't have to pay tax. What are they going to do? They're going to spend that money in the economy. Okay, they save the money. They don't have to put money aside for tax every year like we all do. So, well, okay, we've got to pay our tax at the end of the year.
Right.
And that's a burden on people. We have a wave a magic wand and the money's already in the bank. And we've got our money in our pockets when we go and spend in the shop.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to ask you, I want to ask you something else. So if you Google what is the happiest country in the world, you're probably going to end up with Denmark, Finland, Switzerland, etc., etc. There are those countries. And they ask you, and then if you Google again, why are they the happiest people in the world? And of course, we can have a cool. Let me go on with this. You will find that they are happy because they have governments that work for them, and people in those countries are heavily taxed. In Switzerland, Denmark, people pay huge taxes. Okay, but they are happy to continue paying because they see where the money is going. There's no indication of politicians pocketing some of that money or doing favors for their friends.
No corruption.
So people, So I get a sense, and maybe you have a different view to it. I get a sense that people are happy to say, I'm part of the system because I'm putting money into it and I can see where it's going. Okay, for now, I live in Switzerland, all right? It's very clean where I live, and the systems work, the rubbish collection, there's no, criminality that you get in South Africa and all that. And sometimes when I walk in the street and I see a piece of paper, I pick it up because I said, no, so who dropped this paper? We don't have that in South Africa. So we say, the system does work here. You know what I'm saying? So, and people are happy to pay. I mean, nobody's ever happy to pay taxes. I mean, happy to, but they see where the money is going. They're satisfied that it's good as long as it works for them. Now, do you think if we said to South Africans, you don't have to pay taxes at all, don't you take a sense of pride that they directly contribute to the system? I mean, so they just see the money coming in because You know what I'm saying?
I don't
Don't you think people generate or develop a sense of pride when they see something that they directly contribute to working?
I think there are not many people like the word tax or contributions of tax or anything like that. They'd be happy. Happy as Larry not to pay tax and have a country that was booming. The economy was booming. People don't like to pay tax. And
but do you have to pay it?
It's getting smaller and smaller every day.
Yeah, but in life we have to. You can't get everything for free. Actually, things that are entirely for free. People don't seem to appreciate them. When you're contributing towards something.
For free. It mustn't be for free. But if you are contributing,
maybe we could have a discussion about not. There's a difference between not paying taxes at all and paying not too much. But paying, we'd like to say, if we give stuff to free for people, they don't appreciate. But make them pay something, a small amount, symbolic. They're making a little contribution. They feel that they're part of it. Obviously, if it's just for free, people tend not to respect things that are too much for free.
Well,
I think
that's a debatable point.
Yeah.
I think we've got very few taxpayers in this country, other than those we all contribute through VAT and the petrol levy. I mean, that part of the economy that uses those facilities.
Okay.
Those are taxpayers,
Okay.
But people.
No, but wait. We have very few taxpayers in South Africa because they've been hounded out of the country by BEE, by corruption, by violence, by a whole lot of things. Many people who left the country did not want to leave the country. They want to come. They continue to be connected to South Africa. They continue looking at South Africa. They continue reading South African media online. Even this discussion that we're having, some of them are going to see it online and say, "Yeah, that could be interesting." Or what about it? So they remain attached to their country of birth. But the thing is, we have to create in South Africa an environment where every child, every person, irrespective of what they look like, can feel this is my country. There's a bit of sign of space for me under the South African sign. My children can grow up here, contribute, thrive, do whatever they want to do in life. We need to create that system. And then there'll be more money running through the bank system, as you say, so that whatever portion of it is creamed off into the treasury, so that we have a Teal-like system. But it can't stand as a pillar on its own. Everything else is important.
Well, in the early days of Teal, before we cottoned onto the bank turnover, it's really only recently in the last couple of years that we say, well, we'd ask the Reserve Bank to create to handle the levy.
Right.
In the early days, Teal was going to be at bank level, street level, and we would then have a computer system installed in all the banks, and every deposit and withdrawal would be taxed by the levy. So that would be people's contribution, and that money would go in as normal taxes would go to the treasury. So after the banks collected it, they put it into.
So you take money, a little bit of cream from every transaction. Right.
And essentially, that would be, although it's now done at Reserve Bank level, the 1% would be on the total turnover. So people would be effectively paying tax. If you think about it, the theory is that the money's now going through there and it's being levied at 1%. It's just simplifying the system. So they are paying tax there. So once that is now put into the Treasury Bank or whatever it is and paid to the fiscus, that's money coming in to run the country.
Right.
The additions that could come out of the system using fiat currency, okay, because we all live on fiat currency.
Right.
That would be used.
Is fiat currency? Is it like disposable income?
No, fiat currency is false currency. It's made from thin air. That's how the banks operate.
Okay.
So they take in a deposit. They say this is my reserve, and from the reserve they create loans to you and me and everybody else 10 times what they keep in reserve. So if the state bank had the reserve of 1 trillion rand, they are following normal banking rules, international rules. They could create 10 trillion rand, and that 10 trillion rand could be put into different parts of the economy, school fees, you just name it. There's thousands of places that money can be spent to uplift the country. Housing, you just name it. We've no money for housing.
But all the
Where does this government or any other government find the money to put any money into housing or school fees or whatever.
Because it's stolen.
No. Even if you had the most
No.
robust system.
No, we had a robust system. We did have a robust system, but we had a robust system run by criminal
I guarantee
schmucks.
you we wouldn't have money for school fees. We wouldn't have money for an NHI. You wouldn't be able to, that you just don't have the money for. But now bear in mind, you're saying a small contribution, in essence, it is the people's money. It's their tax.
Alton, let me tell you something. The idea of a state bank scares me. In the same way that, no, I'll tell you. In the same way, the idea of nuclear new build scares me. Not the ideas on their own. I mean, I see those things could do good. I'm not anti-nuclear. I have to tell you this. But under the African National Congress, no. Those big budget events, I'm not going to push them.
You interviewed the politicians the other night. I watched that.
No, but this is true. These are the practical. I mean, you can have, beautiful poetic discussions about ideas, but the things, the practicalities of it also have to be discussed. All right, because you give an ANC government 100 million rand, say, to deliver on a project. Probably 20 million of that would go into the project. The rest will go into paying middlemen and the middlemen of their friends and their girlfriends. And suddenly people come out driving Maserati and the project is still standing there unfinished. Okay. So, let's go back to the practicality. Suppose today, on the 31st of August, 2022, somebody said, well, we've heard about this Teal idea. Where do we start? How long would it take to implement? What would need to happen for it to be ready for implementation? Don't say without a state bank it won't happen, because a state bank would take long to take, and I would be the first one to oppose it, and I would oppose it loudly, not while the ANC is in power.
Well, that's the point. I didn't want to get into a political.
Everything is political.
It involves politics. Yes. Yeah. Let me say this to you: the idea that the fellas from the four parties that you interviewed the other day, they want to get rid of the ANC. So we must assume that the ANC is on the way out.
Yeah, let's assume that. Yeah, it's good for our hearts.
If the checks and balances are put in place, I know you might not like the word state bank, but without the ANC there, right, and the money coming into a controlled banking environment where nobody can put their finger in the cash till, it's controlled. And from there, it's passed down the channels to where it's needed. Schooling and all the rest of the things that we've mentioned. The fixing of all the SOEs, the defense force, the police force, you name it, ESCOM, and so on. All these things would need money. And it's now controlled. One of the things that was raised, and I've sort of been thinking about it for a number of years now, is a federal system of government where the provinces govern themselves. So they would then call on government for X billion rand to run their province.
Yeah, they'd be proportional to, like we have now. I mean, the central government side, there is a system that allows them to, that it requires that they
run themselves. They
devolve a certain amount of money from the fiscus to different provinces on the same, on the basis of size of population and all that.
But in that particular province, there would be a branch of the state bank, let's call it, and the money would go there first. And then the province would have to go to their local bank and draw what money they needed. Notwithstanding the fact that we could create, in Germany, just after the Second World War, I'm told they had what they called Sparkasse or Sparkassen. And money was put through that system down to the man in the street. I believe in low interest rates, something that we could create here with interest rates of 1.5% to 2%. And as a colleague of mine said, that the money generated from the interest would run the computers.
Let me ask again.
There would be money that would be cheap for the people.
Is there a place in the world where they have a state bank that functions as you describe?
No idea. I haven't. It's just these are my ideas.
So there are no benchmarks to look at.
No.
Okay. So, I mean, it is a problem, isn't it? That there are no benchmarks, that we don't have, we can't say
But
this
why
system
can't we be
is.
a first?
No,
Professor
we
Barnett
can.
didn't have any benchmarks when he did the
Of
first
course.
ice operation.
I'm
So
not,
we can do this if we plan it properly. We can do it.
yeah.
What
So,
it needs is a political party to put this up front, get the votes, win the election, and then we put it in place, and it would work. Every single way it would work.
and what happens? Okay, how long would it take for it to be put in place?
I reckon,
from
look,
A to Z?
we did discuss that. Bob Shambrook wrote a book, little booklet, and he put down all his thoughts. And one of the things that we decided on was what you call progressive implementation. So it wouldn't happen overnight, but progressively you could introduce it. I mean, that could be introduced over a 12-month period.
A new bank over a 12-month period? Seriously? Sorry? Are you saying a state bank could be introduced over a 12-month period with all the legislation that requires for the governance issues? It will take longer than that.
I don't know. Why should it be? I mean, you've got the Treasury. You just go to the.
No, there's a whole legislative framework that needs to be created about it. And the thing is,
I think that's true. I'm not saying it's not true, but it could be done if the will was there.
Okay, let me tell you where I'm going.
Remember that this is now the government you're talking to, and they're now running the country, and they don't have to make applications and go through red tape. Just do it. Just put the thing in place and make it work, because we've got a Treasury. We've got very, very capable people who run the Treasury, and who could be, people could be brought in to do it. The Treasury could be run by a board of people coming on board, NGOs, people who run it, and control that money. And we don't need, what do you need permission for? Just put the paper down in front of somebody and get signed.
In a democracy, you need in a democracy, the new democracy you must have, you need permission from the citizens. We're tired of politicians all over Africa. Politicians just make decisions and impose them. That should go. Okay, we need to empower the citizen to own the sovereignty of the country. But anyway, where I was going with my question is this: South Africa, and I'm talking practicalities now. South Africa is heading almost irreversibly into an era of coalitions. I think that as the ANC gets weaker and weaker, and we've seen now many municipalities, provinces are run by by coalitions around the country, there will be more and more. So it looks like the era of big parties taking everything is becoming a thing of the past. Okay, so you're going to have to convince a coalition of parties to say, hey, let's work on this thing. And there will be, South Africans are opinionated, there will be squabbling and all that. But not only that, a typical political mandate lasts for 5 years. 5 years, I think, currently, right? So that's why I was asking you, how long would it take to put in place? Because so this thing starts, and then the mandate ends, they lose power, and somebody else comes in place and says, no, rubbish, we don't want this thing, what were they doing? And probably it would be unfair, because they would come in while this thing, as you said, it would be implemented progressively, but usually progressive, the early years of progressively don't show the results, so people tend to lose. If you look at America with the Obamacare, what they call Obamacare, Trump was already dismantling Obamacare. The Obamacare was saved by Trump losing elections and Biden winning elections, because he has a philosophical political understanding with Barack Obama. So he saved Obamacare, right? But if he were to lose again and say another time person might come in place, the chances that Obamacare relies on who is in power. So if you have a system that relies on who is in power, then it would be very, very unstable. I'm saying so.
Right, so let's take that, using that scenario. Let's assume that you have this and you have the current system.
The current system is not here to stay. No, I like the practicalities of life. The current system is changing. The ANC is not going to be forever. It should go. It will be weaker and weaker and weaker. Other people are going to progressively take over the political space. So, so it's going to be hard.
They still settled with the same form of income or revenue collection. Is that going to stay?
So they still do what?
Would the same revenue collection methods remain if there was a coalition of parties? I mean, would be
if it works, of course it'll stay. But I'm just putting stuff on the road here to things from practicalities we should take into account. I mentioned the fact that SARS, as we know it, is trying to stand up on its feet again. But of course, the tax revenue, the cake has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. And maybe your system would work better because you'd be getting a little bit of a cream from every transaction that runs through the bank. So you shouldn't have to worry about. Would you not have to worry about the number of people who work and who contribute taxes in that system?
Well, I don't know. I think everybody would be, in some way, would be paying tax. I mean, even the cash collection. You say, well, people would hide money under their mattresses if Teal was introduced. They wouldn't. They'd use cash. Well, where would they use cash? They'd cash, go to the shop would bank the money, or they'd pass it down to 6 or 7 shops, and eventually it would find its way into the bank. So cash would be taxed. Okay. So the tax system would be, you couldn't avoid the tax.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe we have elections coming up in less than 2 years now in South Africa. I mean, all things, staying
That's
the same.
what I'm frightened of.
We have elections coming up in around April, May 2024, and so maybe it looks like you need to go back to identify those politicians who seem likely to have the power. One, two, but I would have a two-pronged approach. Politicians, I just don't trust politicians. Okay. Two, I would go to the tax revenue system, to Kisswater, and say, please, let's have coffee. This is what we're doing. Would you be keen to listen to this idea? Because I think they would be very, very shy to have somebody else soon in the aftermath of what happened fairly recently.
True. Yeah.
To say, okay, yeah, let's listen to your ideas, because I don't know, if I were Kisswater, somebody else coming in from outside, they've just said somebody coming in from outside who messed up the system, I would say, no, thank you very much. We're going to do what we do best, which is what we're going to strengthen the system that we know we had, which was robust. Maybe it wasn't collecting as much as a Teal kind of system would collect, but it was working until the corrupt people came into power. So you have a lot of work between now and the next elections to convince the politicians who are the aspirants, if you want, and the system in place to say, actually, while you are still at the early stages of rebuilding, let's have a conversation here. We have some ideas that you might, because the thing is, sometimes you might have come with all this very worked out PowerPoint presentation. There are some ideas in Teal that might be adopted, others that might not be adopted, right? It might not be a wholesome adoption of it.
Well, I've tried, and I'm really have tried over the 30 years to get to people who count.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work. Now, I know that if I got hold of Mr. Kisswater, or if you did the introduction because of your position, and you said to him, listen, I think this is a good idea, why don't you listen to Alton Geils? Maybe he makes a point. I would bring all my people along who are keen on Teal.
I don't want to play the Zuma game. I think if
Kisswater, I don't want to do that. I would like to see their reaction, because if it could be, Teal, you can't add it to a current system. You could introduce it slowly, but it must eventually be the way the taxes are collected. And if it was successful for 5 years, why would anybody coming in would want to change it? It's money collected and it runs the country.
Yeah, so Kisswater and I have never met, we've never spoken together. Maybe one day we will, but I don't need to do the introduction. This discussion that we're having, you and I, hopefully it'll land on his laptop somehow. And then
let's hope so, yeah.
He'll look at it and say, oh, wait a minute, what is this? Let's have a look. I want to meet this Alton Geils.
What's the judge's name? Dennis Davis.
Yes.
I attempted at one point to get hold of him. I don't know how the radio people get hold of him to talk to him, but you have to go through a process. You talk about starting a state bank takes 5 years to implement. You're trying to get hold of these people.
I know
get them to listen to you. It's impossible. They don't listen.
I know a gentleman. I know a gentleman from Somerset West. Are you from Cape Town?
No.
Okay, anyway, I know a gentleman from Somerset West. His name is Donald Brown. He seems to have a way of getting into all of these people that you and I cannot. I have no idea how he does it. Maybe you should invite him for coffee. You could get you into Kisswater's office.
I tell you, Donald knows Des Palm
Right.
from Cape Exit.
Right.
And Cape Exit, if they are successful, they are very, very keen on teal.
Yeah, but they won't be successful.
They
won't be successful, but that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah, sure.
There's no part of South Africa in my current life that is going to separate and become an independent country. It's a dream. It's fine. Let people continue dreaming. That's my view, of course.
Well, sure.
Anyway, Alton Geils, it's been awesome to have this conversation with you, and I really hope that somehow there will be a way for you to get coffee with some of the people who have the influence to listen to this discussion, to these ideas, and take them to the next level. Hopefully, get them tested in a way that is not going to place South Africa at jeopardy again, because we cannot afford to do that.
You see, okay, just to conclude.
Yeah.
The current system of tax collection, okay, it's a plethora of taxes. It's this long. I looked at it the other day.
Right. I agree.
And they are a lot of them draconian type taxes, because they impinge on people.
Right.
If we had the system like Teal would bring in that extra money without the angst that goes with it, okay, it would be in itself a blessing for the people of the country. And there would be enough money. We need to uplift the people of this country. We need to have money for poverty, to uplift people out of poverty. I mean, it's disgusting the way people live in this country. They need to be uplifted. They need to get jobs. And without money in the system, Solly, I can tell you we'll never do it. And you'll never do it with the current tax collection system. It's a shrinking base. It's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. People who pay tax are leaving the country where they can, and taxes are going to become. I mean, if you're trying to collect in a trillion rand, your tax base is shrinking. You're never going to do it. And there'll never be money for service delivery. There won't be money for schooling. There won't be money for anything. There won't no NHI. It's just getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and the country is suffering daily.
I feel it.
We know the ANC stole the money, but we won't have them. They won't be in government.
Okay, Giles.
If we get a government in place where Teal is the driver, believe me, the country would succeed.
Okay, for a minute,
I could get that message across to politicians like the guys you had. If there's a coalition, let there be a coalition, but let them run the country using Teal. It's a new broom. What's they say? The new broom sweeps clean.
Okay, that's what we need. For a minute, you're beginning to sound like a scripted television ad there about Teal.
I don't mean to.
Okay, that's okay. Anyway,
I've done this for so long. I've done it for so long. I've had these discussions, with people.
Yeah.
And I haven't found one really who says that they have questions. But the Teal system will work.
Yeah, in life,
that there is no doubt.
In life, people with ideas should never give. I'm really, really impressed by you having held on to this idea for more than 30 years. I think there's always a door that's going to. We keep knocking on many doors, and one day a door suddenly opens. That's the one that's meant to open at the right time. Sometimes it's a matter of timing. So I hope that somebody is going to either watch this discussion and take it to another person who's going to be the one to say, you know what, it's making me curious. I want to hear more about it, and let's see if it can work for South Africa.
But thank you very much, and I certainly hope it does. You speak to influential people. I heard you talking to Rob Hersov.
It's as I said, it's my friend in Somerset West. You should stay close to that man.
I'm gonna ask him to talk to Des.
You should ask that man to open those. I don't know. I have no idea how he does it, but he's good. He's very good.
Very capable man.
Anyway, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, also those of you who've stayed with this discussion to the point where we are at now, it means that you've enjoyed it and you are also keen to remain members of this growing WorldView community. You're going to share this video around until it gets to Kisswater, to the politicians, to everybody else who must listen, and that you will continue subscribing and encouraging your friends to subscribe to WorldView. For today, this is Solim Wang with Alton Geils. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Solly.